get right into it. Here we go. Okay. Very good. Let's take that off screen. And let's even take that off screen. Okay. And here we go. So we were learning the Mishneh Torah. And just to give this a little bit more life, because we're looking at it as a text online, if we were learning in person, here's what we'd be learning from. Just like you to see. Like you to see a Mishneh Torah, one example. This is my Mishneh Torah. It's a big book. It weighs, it's got weight, it's got substance. And this is a page of Mishneh Torah. And then this is the standard layout. There's the standard Surah Sadaf, the standard layout of a Mishneh Torah. As with most rabbinic documents or religious books, there's the structure normally is that the main text is in the middle. It's the same with the Talmud and with Mishnah and with pretty much every standard religious text. And the commentary is on the side. And it's known as a Surah Sadaf. And in Gemara talk, the format of the standard page. And there's this larger version. And when I was younger and had even better vision, underneath these books, underneath these Sepharim, here's a set of Mishneh Torah. And if I were to open up one of these pages, in one of these volumes, you would have identically this layout, just a smaller version. So I use the bigger version. It's just a little easier on the eyes. And let's just bring in one more person and let's go to the text. But I wanted you to see, I like people to see these texts and to see their substance. Let's just also, while I'm here, let me take this off screen, and it cuts down on the squares that sometimes can show up and are annoying. Okay. So we learned from Rambam about the power of the king. And that's important. I'm going to keep bringing this a little bit for various reasons today. But that's the power of the king, that he carries a Torah with him, and he has the power to decree life and death on people whom he feels, rightly or wrongly, he feels someone's in rebellion. And we were learning about him. He's got special rights and privileges, and there are certain limits on that, but he's still got a lot of leverage, and leeway. Lo yarbel lo nashim, that on the one hand, he should not have too many wives. And then we learned what that means is he's limited to 18. We learned that he's limited to no more than 18 wives. And that sounds extraordinary for us in our monogamistic society. And even in a polygamistic society, the Torah allows polygamy. And therefore, we've seen situations where people had more than one wife in the Bible. And besides kings, nevertheless, 18 would be a lot, and it would take a tremendous amount of wealth. And Barry Mednick had dropped me a note, maybe the whole group got to see it, talking about how Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, they had 40, this one had 40 wives, this one had 56 wives. He must have been quite a guy. But the king of Israel is limited to 18, and then the question is whether the pilagshim, the concubines, are included. And then if he goes beyond that, he gets whipped. And I remember commenting, good luck if you're the one who's assigned to whip the king. But he gets whipped. He's allowed to get divorced if he wants to. If he's at 18 and he meets someone he wants to bring in, yeshlo legaresh v'lisach haretachat zu shigeresh. He's allowed to divorce one of them to bring someone else in to to keep within his 18. Again, it doesn't seem like something that most of the kings did, but we know that David married many wives, and we know that that his son Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, did run into an issue of whether he had too many wives. V'lo yarbelo susim, and here's so we kind of ended last week. He should not have more horses, elakademer kavto, only as many as he needs for the purposes of his cavalry. But just to have a collection of lots and lots of, let's say, white horses, to show them off. Here's a sign of my wealth. That's not permitted. And again, it became some of these became issues with King Solomon. Afilu sus echad panui liot ratz lefanav kederach sha'osin sha'ar melachim asur. We learned this last week. Again, I just want us to refresh from where we left off, and here's where we left off, that some would have an extra horse, some kings of the nations, aside from Israel, it was a thing always to have a horse in the front of your retinue. Here comes the king, and the king in his stagecoach or in his fancy coach, not a stagecoach, that's the American West, but a fancy royal coach, and there would be a horse in front, a grand stallion or something like that. The king of Israel is not allowed to have that. B'imhosi flokeh, and if he goes over his allowed amount, he gets whipped. He's to be lashed. Literally, he gets lashed. So he doesn't do it. Imagine the public lashing of the king. He's not going to put himself in that position. V'lo yarbelo kesef v'zahav, and the king should not have a multitude of wealth, of money. So this is kind of interesting. There is the royal treasury. That's going to be the royal, literally that's where that expression, the royal jewels and everything. Kings would have extraordinary wealth. They even talk about the current king and queen of England when it was Elizabeth II as queen or Charles as king. And they talk about the extraordinary wealth in the royal jewels of the kingdom. But there's a limit on how much the king is supposed to have. So let's take a look what that means. And this is all as preliminary to the power of the king to declare war and force everyone, like it or not, to be part of the military activity and part of the army or whatever role the king assigns to you, or the king's officers assign. He should not just go around increasing his wealth that he stores in his royal treasury, with his royal jewels. Just to be ga'ava, just to be proud and show off with pride how rich he is. Rather, the king has in his employ, part of being a king of Israel, the soldiers have to be paid a salary. The king has the authority to have people drafted and pulled out of their regular lives and forced into the army, into military conscript. But they have to be paid. In the United States, soldiers are paid. Now it's an all-volunteer army. During the period of conscription, soldiers get paid. And so where does the money come from? So he's allowed to tax the public to have that, to pay for his soldiers and his servants, those who attend to him in his palace and otherwise. Also, he's allowed to, and there's allowed to be a lot of money coming in to support the Holy Temple, the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem. People are taxed. It's a Torah thing. We learn in Shkalim, that Parshat Shkalim, in Parshat Kitisa and everything, people are taxed every year around this time of year. Just around this time of year, around the time of Adar, about a month before the new year begins in Nisan, everybody gets taxed. and that money goes towards the needs of the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, including shiputzim, the repairs and upkeep. And you have to buy the animals. Seriously, you have to buy the animals that are offered, like the daily sacrifice, the korban tamid, the daily sacrifice. Twice a day there were sacrifices, even on a regular day, not a holiday, morning and afternoon. And that costs money. And that's what the people are paying taxes for. And he's allowed, that tax money goes towards the Beit HaMikdash. We said that he's allowed to tax people for the employment of his army and of the people in his palace, and in order for the general popular need to fill potholes. I mean, I just had to be today with Denise in Los Angeles, and you're in LA when you feel the potholes. Not that they don't have any in Orange County, but they have more in LA. And when you're in New York, I mean, it's a Disneyland ride. And to pay for the war. Israel right now, tragically, is at war. Costs a lot to have war. There's the obvious and the not obvious. The obvious is buying the fighter aircraft and the bombs that they drop, on the grenades and the anti-tank missiles and the rocket-propelled grenades and the tanks and the Navy boats and the aircraft. But beyond that, you have to pay soldiers. And you have all kinds of associated costs of war, repairing structures that get damaged if the other side shoots rockets into your territory nowadays. The only thing forbidden in terms of gathering wealth is having leftover that gets added to his royal jewels to show them off. That's not allowed. The imher ba'alokat. And again, if he overdoes it, he gets whipped. He is to be lashed. The king is forbidden to drink to the degree of becoming drunk. He's allowed to have some wine, some whiskey, but he's not allowed to get intoxicated. Shichrut is from the word shikar, shikor. Shikor is drunk. Shechar is whiskey. Shikar is the Yiddish garbling of the Hebrew. Shikor, again, a drunk is a shikar. Alim lachim shtuyayin. It says in the book of Proverbs 31, verse 4, wine is not for kings. Al limlachim lemoel el lamlachim shtuyayin. Wine is not for kings, not for kings to drink, not any strong drink for princes. This is from Proverbs, namely Mishneh, chapter 31. Eliyah osek b'Torah. So what should he do? A Jew, all the more so the king, should not be a drunk, but should learn Torah and be involved in Torah, u'b'tzorchei Yisrael bayom u'valayla, and with the needs of the people of Israel day and night. It was inappropriate. Netanyahu's enemies wanted, before this war began, there's a tremendous effort. Netanyahu has managed to acquire over 12 years as prime minister a huge amount of enemies. It's part of democratic politics. I don't mean the Democratic Party, but it's part of the political way that Democrats and Republicans in America and Israel, they have 30, 40 parties. Everybody tries to character assassinate their opponents because they're going to go to elections whenever they go, and they want to have every advantage they can. And so they put forth their own platforms, political platforms, and they attack their opponent's political platform. And that's fair game. And the nasty stuff is, you're starting to see it now as America gears up for a presidential election. So you see the nastiness, not just over issues, but how it starts getting nasty between right now, the Republicans who've been running. Now it's down. Now, and then there were two. Now it's down to Trump and Haley. But a few weeks ago, so you had nastiness from and towards DeSantis and Ramaswamy, the whole bunch of them. So in Israel, Netanyahu's been around 12 years, and he's acquired a lot of enemies. And the harder it has been over the past to take him down, the more they look for whatever they can get. This time around, it'll be easier. He's getting a lot of the blame in Israel for October 7. People are saying Hamas came into being over the last 15 years, and you were prime minister 12 of them. What were you doing while they were building 500 miles of tunnels? And what were you doing while they were building up into what they are now? And we thought you were the tough one, and we kind of let you lead the way. And when you said, let Qatar send those billions into support Hamas, and you assured us that Hamas was using the money to build a government, so what do we know? So we're blaming you for everything. So before they had this to blame him, which is going to probably take him down, they were looking for other things. And one of the things they came up with is that he had helped a very, very well-known Israeli who spends very little of his time in Israel. He's in Australia, he's in England, he's a film producer. He produced a number of successful movies. Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere, and about 4 or 5 really major movies. I forgot the movies right now, but anyway, he was having trouble getting into America. He was having trouble with John Kerry, then was the foreign minister, the Secretary of State, and Kerry was not giving this guy a visa. I don't know what the politics was, and the guy turned to Netanyahu and said, "I'm having trouble getting a visa. Can you get me a visa?" And so Netanyahu interceded with the Secretary of State to get this guy a visa to come into America. And as a sign of thanks, the guy sent him a whole bunch, and I mean cases upon cases of pink champagne. And eventually came out that Netanyahu accepted all the champagne from this guy. And also later it came out this guy sent him high quality cigars. And that has been Netanyahu, until the war came, Netanyahu was facing, like Trump, 4 different lawsuits, 4 different prosecutions, lawfare they call it, to bring him down. And one of the 4 cases was whether he violated the public trust by accepting the cigars and the champagne. And many of us, Alan Dershowitz and some very prominent outside lawyers also said this is a ridiculous thing. This is ridiculous. It just grasping at straws. But there was a national feeling. I mean, I'm of that people who have learned the ways of Judaism and the values of Judaism is that there's something that it's not prosecutorial, so to speak. It's not really criminal and it doesn't deserve to be prosecuted, but there's something that doesn't accord with Jewish values, and it's just something that rubs wrong to have a leader of Israel accepting so much alcohol. Jews do not drink. Jews drink. And on Purim and Pesach and Simchas Torah, there are even questions about whether Jews are allowed to drink to the point of drunkenness. Rambam says no, others say yes. But basically, we have this tradition from Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, a king does not get alcoholic. King does not drink too much. And it's just something against the Jewish way. Rather, a person should be intellectually alert at all times so he can study Torah. You can't learn Torah when you're drunk. And he should be involved in the needs of Israel. And he should not be just going out hunting for wild boar, which isn't kosher anyway. So that's who the king is. And likewise, v'chein lo yeshatuf b'nashim. He shouldn't be spending too much time with his wives. He should be spending his time learning Torah. Afilu lo hayatalo el achat, lo yematzui etzla tamid. Even if he has only one wife, not 18. he shouldn't be spending all his time with his wife. And we're not talking here that he shouldn't have good quality time with his wife. And we're not saying he shouldn't go on vacation and spend 2 weeks or 1 week, whatever, alone with his wife. But he shouldn't be someone like some of these, like the image of some of these Arab oil emirate type kings that you see in the movies from the 1960s and whatever, with harems of 100 women, and that's and they're just involved with that all the time. Rather, he should be involved in Torah. Shalibo hu lev kol kahal Yisrael. The thing is that he represents in his public image all the people of Israel. Lefichach dibko hakatav Torah yeter mishar am. He should be primarily involved in Torah. Okay, and we've used this primarily for the purpose of giving you a flavor of the power of the king as we go into the much deeper subject. But it's so important just jump in, at least for me, to just jump into chapter 5 without preceding it with getting a good hand on who this king is. So just a touch more, just 2 more, number 7 and 8, and then we're going to go to 5. Kavar be'arnu shemachay bet Davidanin otam umeidin olam. We've already said you're allowed to put a king on trial. Just like, again, it's different, but just as in America now there's lawfare against Donald Trump, I can't think of a previous president who's been put on trial. I know my American history pretty well. Nothing's coming to mind right away. If there's anything I'm missing, I'm counting on Barry Mednick to drop me a note about it. But you don't really see that much. Israel, they like doing that. Israel, they perceive that it's a sign that they're holier than all the other secular nations. And these are the secularists in Israel who aren't doing it out of religious motivation, but they like to think that it somehow shows they're better than all the other countries by putting their leaders on trial. And they've been successful in locking a couple of them up. They locked up Ehud Olmert. Turned out he was a crook. Ehud Olmert was prime minister a couple of cycles ago, briefly, during a war in Lebanon, the one war that was a complete disaster, where he and his foreign minister didn't know what they were doing. It's not my political opinion, it was commonly understood that Olmert was the Peter principle. He didn't belong there, and his prime minister was a union leader who was the head of a Labor Party. And he was a union leader, makes sense, head of Labor Party, and negotiated to go into the government coalition. He demanded to be the defense minister. And he had no business being defense minister, but Olmert needed him in the coalition and made him defense minister. Then there was a war. It was a big disaster. Thank God Israel's people were stronger than their leadership. And he was eventually put on trial and thrown in jail. Also, not too long ago, one of the presidents of Israel. The president has more ceremonial role than governmental role. America doesn't have that. In America, the president is also the head of state and the head of government. By contrast, the United Kingdom, they have a prime minister, and then they have not a president, but they have the king or the queen. Represents them. Here in Israel now, I say here, I'm in America. In Israel now, there's a prime minister, still Netanyahu, and the president now is Herzog. So you've seen him around occasionally. Prior presidents have included Shimon Peres, and Navon was a good president. Okay, so in Israel, they put him on trial. They lock him up every so often. And it's part of our tradition that you can put a king on trial and you can testify. Aval Malchei Yisrael gazru chachamim shelo yadun v'lo danin otam. This takes more time than I want to get into, but I've made reference from time to time to the fact that there was a civil war that resulted in the kingdom of Israel breaking in half. And God willing, our Tuesday night class probably take us a year to get there, but in the book of Kings, Malachim, after King Solomon dies, under his son King Rehoboam, there divides into two countries. The southern country becomes known as Judea, the country of Yehudah, otherwise called the southern kingdom. And the northern country often is referred to simply as the northern kingdom, and sometimes it's known as the kingdom of Samaria, and sometimes the kingdom of Israel. The lineage of David included King David, King Solomon, King Rehoboam, and the subsequent kings of Judea, the southern kingdom, were Malchei Beis David. They were the kings from the house of David. Well, they had kings in the north also, but those kings came from tribes like Ephraim, and not from the house of David, Judea. So those are known as Malchei Yisrael. And those kings could not be put on trial, and they couldn't testify against them. And so it went. And I said the last one I wanted to do now. V'chol mored of Melech Yisrael yesh lamelech reshut lahargo. Anyone who rebels against the king of Israel, the king has authority to have him executed. Afilu gazar al echad mishar ha'am sheyelech lemakom ploni v'lo alach. Even if, and I mentioned this last class, but very fleetingly, but now just to take a moment more, if he orders someone to go somewhere and that person refuses to go, that person could he could have him executed. O shalo yatsa mi beitov yatsa shalo yatseh actually mi beitov yatsa chayav mita. Or if the king orders that you should not leave your house or whatever, and the guy does anything against the king's order, he can be executed by the command of the king, no trial. If the king wants to kill him, he gets killed. Shneimar, kol ish asher yamred picha. This is based on the book of Joshua. Anyone who violates, who goes against. And likewise, we did this last week also, but I just wanted to reinforce it. V'chein kol ha'mavaza et hamelech o ha'machlorfo yesh lamelech reshut largo. Unlike the United States, where we make it part of the rituals of the American society, to mock the president, late night TV, to mock the president, cartoonists making political cartoons that make fun of the president, or just to mock him or criticize him, the king has authority to have him killed. And then he brings the examples, and so on and so forth. So we see the extraordinary power of the king of Israel. Okay, let's go to chapter 5. And all of these things continue in chapter 4. The same. I just, for time purposes, we won't study them. But the power of the king to take land, to conscript people, he has an authority that's way beyond anything we imagine in our modern day life as Americans. But I want to share with you one thing that America has authority to do. In the context of the king, for example, having the authority to take people's property. In the United States, under a constitution, the Fifth Amendment, everybody's heard of the Fifth Amendment, primarily, I take the Fifth, which means they don't want to testify. So under the Fifth Amendment, you cannot be forced against your will in a criminal case to testify against yourself in a way that will incriminate you, that will subject you to prosecution potentially as being a criminal. And one way that the government gets around it is they say to someone, all right, we'll sign a deal, we'll make a deal, that no matter what you say, you will not be brought up on charges. Therefore, the Fifth Amendment will not apply to you because you cannot theoretically incriminate yourself by admitting you committed this murder, you perpetrated this murder, but we're making a deal that no charges whatsoever will be brought against you for incriminating yourself. Therefore, technically, as we understand the Fifth Amendment, you were not incriminating yourself. You're not making yourself a criminal. We're giving you a waiver. Okay. people know that part of the Fifth Amendment, but there's more to the Fifth Amendment. There's the takings clause, and these are called clauses. A clause is either someone who brings gifts down the chimney and leaves it at the tree on December 25th. That's one clause. And in grammar, a clause is a statement that includes both a noun and a verb, a subject and a predicate, as opposed to a phrase which has only half of it. So it's known as the takings clause. First of all, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime. In other words, not jaywalking, which is not a crime, you would think, unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. So first of all, that's why they bring in grand juries in America. When you hear there's a grand jury looking into allegations against Trump, and then the grand jury came back with a decision, usually in case of Trump, usually guilty or an indictment. So those are, that's for a major crime. Unlike a so-called smaller crime, they'll just bring the criminal charges, but on a major thing, they bring a grand jury. Okay. And then it goes through all of that. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense twice. That's the famous double jeopardy idea, right? So that's also the Fifth Amendment, double jeopardy. If you've been put on trial for a crime and you were found not guilty, that's it. They can't bring back later on when they get more evidence. So you got to be sure. That's why sometimes you hear they're planning to bring a trial and you say, "No, what's taking so long?" And the prosecutors are gathering more evidence. They want to be sure that when they bring their case, they've got all their evidence, because if they bring it too soon and they didn't have that most important piece of evidence, and therefore the guy was found not guilty, then they can't bring the case later when they get more evidence. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. So that's also the fifth. That's the famous part. I plead the fifth. Nor, and here we go, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. That's the takings clause. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So the government cannot declare eminent domain. Let's say they want to build a highway or a freeway. California, it's called a freeway. They want to build a highway or a freeway, and someone's got a house in the way. And they need that property because it'll cost a fortune to have to reroute the intended freeway or highway around that house. So the government has authority of eminent domain. They can just declare the government takes the house. And they're supposed to pay just compensation. It's the best I could compare it to, excuse me. If you've ever had a car accident where your car is pretty much totaled, or if you drive a very, very old car and it gets injured, it gets damaged, and then you call your insurance company, and the insurance company says, "We just sent out the guy to look at your car, and it doesn't pay to fix it. Either it was totaled or it could be fixed, but it's not worth it. It's cheaper to just pay you for your car as if it were fixed than to go and fix it." So the insurance company will tell you they have the authority based on the terms of the insurance policy that they don't have to fix your car if they're willing to just pay you just compensation. And then you get involved in a negotiation with them where they don't want to pay you maximum value of your car, but they want to keep you as a customer. And they don't want public controversy that they don't pay right. So you try to get more out of them, and they give you what they give you. So that's how that works. So when the king of Israel has the authority to take land, and we're going to learn that here, chapter 5. Ein hamelech nilcham techila ela mechemet mitzvah. The king has authority to declare war. And in the first instance, he should not declare war except a Torah commanded war. And what's that? Ve'ezo hi milchemet mitzvah. So Rambam beat me and asked the question first. And what is a Torah commanded war? Like you hear about, I'm going to do a mitzvah. I'm going to help the elderly person cross the street. And you got to make sure, by the way, they want to cross the street. If they're screaming, I don't want to cross the street. But like, that's my good deed. Or I did a good deed. I found $1 on the ground and I saw the person who dropped it and I did a mitzvah. Or like a parent would say to a child, "Would you do me a mitzvah and clean up your bedroom?" So that the word mitzvah becomes like it's almost like a joke, a little bit. Do a good deed. People use the term mitzvah like a good deed, but actually it comes from the word sivui, the tsav, those two letters tsav, which means command. Tsav means command. Sivui is a commandment. If what God had decreed at Mount Sinai to the nation were in fact 10 commandments, they would be known as Aseret HaMitzvot, the 10 commandments. It's a wrong translation by King James. It's actually Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 declarations, or the 10 pronouncements. So a Melchemet Mitzvah, the word mitzvah literally means a Torah commandment, something God commanded, or that the rabbis commanded in the name of religious law, like reciting a bracha. So that's a mitzvah. It's a commandment to recite a bracha before you eat and after you eat. So where's that commandment? In the Torah, there is a reference, Chalta v'savata v'rachta. There's one place you should eat and be satisfied, satiated, and should bless. And the rabbis understand that refers to having a meal with bread. So if you've had bread, it's a Torah commandment to say a bracha after the meal. But where do you get that you have to say a bracha for non-bread meals? That you drink water, shahakol ni'ebed v'ro, you eat an apple, bori pri ha'etz? That's commanded by the rabbis. And without going too far afield beyond that, that's where mitzvah also. A melchemet mitzvah is a Torah commanded mitzvah. The Bible commands. So where's that? Zo melchemet shiva amamim. And that's the law against the 7 nations that are laid out specifically in the Torah. The Canaanites and the Perizzite and the Chivai and the Yevusi, the Girgashi, the Chiti. These are Canaanite nations, and it is a Torah commandment to take the lands from them. Melchemet Amalek, and we've talked about that before, fighting the Amalekites. Ve'ezrat Yisrael miyad sor sheba alehem. And here we go with what's going on now in Israel. Because in the secular world, they debate, should Israel go to war? Is Israel fighting too long? Is Israel committing genocide? Should Israel be bombing even more? Because the more buildings they bomb, the fewer soldiers on the ground who will get killed by snipers. And that's why they had very few deaths in the first phase of the war before the first hostage agreement, because they were aerial bombing in advance of the tanks and the ground forces coming in. So the ground forces were not meeting with much resistance. And on our Sunday morning class, we've seen video of all the rubble and everything. And after the hostage agreement, when they resumed the war, they stopped as much aerial bombing. And now they're sending in the boys in areas where there are snipers, where previously those buildings had been taken out and the people in the buildings were taken out with them. And so that's the secular debate. The secular debate is this too much? And now everyone likes talking about now what's going to be the day after when this war ends. This war can go on for 1.5 years, really. And they're already talking about who's going to be in charge of Gaza when it's over. Will it be the Palestine Authority that's currently led by Mahmoud Abbas? Will it be led by there's a suggestion, the local Arab clans, that there are different families of clans, and maybe the leaders of the clans would be in charge. There are all kinds of, will there be an international force? an international force comprised of people overseen by the Arab countries and the Abraham Accords that have made peace with Israel, all kinds of debates. But so with each day that the war goes on, the debate becomes stronger. Should they stop the war? Well, Rambam's telling us, Ezrat Yisrael miyad sor sheba alehem. It is a commanded war. It is Torah commanded, not optional, not strategic, not a matter of strategy, not a matter of, well, the Knesset Defense Committee has met and has made a decision that, no, if someone comes to bring tsar, someone brings an attack on the Jews, it is a Torah commandment to go to war against them. More of a debate before October 7, like a month or 2 or 3 months before October 7. You know Hamas is out to destroy Israel. You know that's in their charter, that's what they live for. They live to die, to destroy Israel. That's their reason, raison d'etre. That's their reason for being. So the question 3-4 months in advance might have been, well, they exist to destroy Israel. Is it a Torah commandment to go to war against them right now? If you could show they descend from Amalek, yeah. But that's a little bit challenging because we don't really know who's genetically Amalek. And so you get into rabbinic debates whether Amalek is literally genetic, someone from that tribe of people, a descendant of Esav through Eliphaz and Timnah to Amalek, which we've learned about before in one of our classes. Or is Amalek theoretical, not literal, that people who exist to destroy the Jews? So that's one debate. But once they attack on October 7th and they do what they did, then it's a mitzvah in the Torah to go to war against them. Ezrat Yisrael miyad sor sheba alehem. A war fought to assist Israel from an enemy who attacks them. V'achar kach, after the king has fought, and only then, the wars I'm going to mention, only may be brought after he's taken care of all of his milchemet mitzvahs. First, you have to take care of God's commandments before you decide, I want to do some other stuff. V'achar kach, now that he's taken care of Amalek such that it is, and the 7 nations, and others that are attacking, then nilcham b'milchemet ureshut. Then he could make optional wars. V'hi ha'milchama shenilcham im she'or ha'amim. And that's a war that would be fought against any other nations. Kedei laharchiv gvul Yisrael. The thing that they accuse Israel of doing, that Israel's enemies accuse Israel of having done in 1967, the accusation that you went to war in order to occupy land, imperialism. Britain went to India and South Africa and the 13 colonies. Actually, originally it was only about 10 or 12 colonies. New York was in the hands of the Dutch, New Amsterdam, and but that was imperialism to increase her borders. That's why Spain and Portugal came to the New World, South America, to increase their borders and their power and the glory. And perhaps that's why Putin is fighting in Ukraine, depending on how you look at that war. So let's say a king of Israel wants to do that. Now, 1967, for those of us who've studied that, and one of these days we'll have a series of classes on that, the 67 war was a defensive war. Egypt had declared war by blockading the Straits of Tiran, an act of war. And then they had Utant, who then was like Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN. There were United Nations expeditionary forces stationed between Israel and Egypt in the Sinai. And basically Nasser decided he's going to make war. So he blockaded Straits of Tiran. Then he said to the Secretary General of the UN, I want the United Nations forces taken out because they're in the way. And under the terms of those forces, how whoever made those decisions, either side could just insist that the forces be taken out. And so Israel suddenly had Egypt basically moving in on them. Israel asked Syria and Jordan to stay out. Syria was in it with Egypt from the beginning. Hussein wanted to stay out. Nasser basically sent Hussein the idea, if you don't join us, you may have an accident like your father who was assassinated. And so Hussein ended up declaring war on Israel. And then it became a defensive war, and Israel won. So she ended up she didn't occupy Judea Samaria, she liberated Judea and Samaria in a defensive war. But let's say a prime minister of Israel, well, these laws don't apply to prime ministers, they apply to kings primarily, but a king of Israel decides, I already have Judea Samaria. I've already, and the eastern side of Jordan also. I've already liberated the lands, and I want more territory. I want to have a grander country. I want to stand as like Putin. I want to restore the great Soviet Empire. That's these people like Putin, like Hitler. Why did they go to war? Like the English and the French kings in the Middle Ages constantly fighting, and all these countries to fight over territory. So what do you have to, you want all these deaths for an extra strip of land? Yes, indeed. We want a bigger country. So if a king wants, because I had to explain it, because it's like, in a way, the mindset of us, we like to live and we like peace. And who wants to go to war for more land? We have enough land. There's plenty of Israel, like in my mind today, Israel's got enough land for right now. We need more Jews to move to Israel, and they've got plenty of land. And if Israel would be able to even hold on to Gaza, let's say they could clear out all 2 million Arabs, and let's say they could take, even then, it would be not so much that they're looking to expand the borders. We're all Zionists. We all know what we're thinking. None of us wants to see, none of us woke up in the morning in the last 30, 50 years thinking, I wish we could take Gaza. I wish we Jews had Gaza. Then we would have quite an Israel. Nobody thinks like that. No one in Israel thinks. All you want is just leave us alone. But let's say there's a defensive war. Okay, so you have to take it. And if they could throw them out and move them in, that would not be occupation. That's what the world would call it, occupying. But a great many of us would say they liberated the land. Finally, they cleared it out. But there's such a thing as certain kings in our past. I mean, 2,000 years ago, Alexander Yanai, he expanded Israel's borders. He did Milchemet Reshut. He just wanted a greater Israel. So after the king of Israel wins the wars that are commanded of him, he's allowed to declare optional wars. In other words, wars that aren't commanded. That he fights simply for the purpose of expanding Israel's borders. He does it in order to expand the borders, to magnify its greatness and reputation. That we, instead of talking about how Israel's the size of New Jersey, that he wants it to be the size of Texas, that he's ashamed, he comes and they talk about Israel's the size of New Jersey. So wants to be compared, let's say, to Texas. So let's just get a flavor here. Here's Israel. We learned about the cities of refuge. And this is Israel. Here's the Jordan River. This is the Sea of Galilee, the Lake of Kinneret. This is the Salt Sea, or the Dead Sea, Yam HaMelach. This is the Mediterranean Sea. When they talk about from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they're talking about this river to the sea. So if they free all of this land for Palestine, what happens to Israel? It disappears. That's why some of us take offense at that, or respond from the river to the sea. All of Israel will be free. Israel also is on the east bank of the Jordan River. Menashe, a lot of land there. They had more land in this side than they had in this side. Menashe is the one tribe that had land on both sides. And that was deliberate, because the concern was that for Reuven and Gad, the fear was they're developing east of a river. In those days, unlike nowadays, not so easy to get across the river. And the fear was eventually they're going to become their own culture, and they're going to become different from the Jews. This will be the land of the Jews. And these people are going to develop their own culture, just like today the Arabs in the so-called West Bank have developed a completely different culture from the Arabs in the Gaza over there. There's Gaza, and there's the so-called West Bank, Judea, Samaria. So they've developed two different cultures. That's why some people say the Palestine Authority, they think that it'll be good if they're in charge in Gaza. That won't be good. They're just as bad, but they're under Israel's got military control over them, which Israel gave up in 2005 down there. But cultures develop. So there was a fear that they would develop their own culture. So by Moshe's agreement, God's command, Moshe's agreement, one tribe was settled on both sides, that it would be a sort of link. Menashe would always be linked with Menashe, and that would keep everybody honest in one country. Let's say the king of Israel has this and decides, really, I want a little bit of Moab. I want a little bit of Ammon. I want to extend our borders into Edom. So that's what Rambam's talking about, where he's got options on that regard. And let's see where I left off there. We were on, so that's the Mishnah. So I wanted to show you, what is the source of Rambam? Like, is Rambam, quote unquote, making this up? And in fact, Rambam, in great measure, there was a tremendous, tremendous debate. Rambam does not have footnotes to anything. He studied the Torah, and he studied the Mishnah and the Talmud, and he presented the laws of Judaism. He saw that the Talmud, everything is, quote unquote, all over the place. So he recodified it in a way to bring the laws together, subject by subject. And in so doing, making it subject by subject, it would be like we could study it this way, the laws of the king. Instead of my one class taking from Devarim, Deuteronomy, and another class from Shmos, Exodus, and another one from Bamidbar, Numbers, and taking from all over the place, he recodified it. So what happened is, it's an extraordinary, extraordinary accumulation of recodifying all of Judaism, everything in the Talmud. Most of us in a lifetime never even get to study everything in the Talmud. You just don't get there. There's just no time. And how do you study all of that? Many of us don't even have the ability to study it. But even those with the ability, there are segments of the Talmud that are so esoteric, you never get to it. So what he did was he put it all out there, footnotes. And there was an enormous, enormous debate. I believe it was the 1100s. After he died, maybe I have to update on this for a while. But the Rambam was in Spain, which borders southern France. And it's the Iberian Peninsula, but it's near South France. And there was a very rich and lively, I'm going to mute it all here. There was a very rich and lively Torah community in southern France, Provence. And the rabbis of southern France decided the Rambam is a heretic. We don't know where he came up with half this stuff. There's no footnotes. And we don't know. It's like the way some of the anti-Chabad people talk about the Chabad, where there's debates between the Chabad, let's say, and the Satmars, and each challenge the authority of the other side and of their Rebbe. So the southern French Provence Jews challenge the authority of Rambam. Today, Rambam is universally recognized as the great, every town has a Maimonides hospital or a Maimonides day school. But at that point, they burned his books. They actually burned his books. And there are some who even say that's what gave the idea to King Louis IX in 1242 in France of burning all the Jewish books. There are some who say the idea of burning Jewish manuscripts came from the rabbis of France, southern France, who burned the Rambam's books. And they burned all the manuscripts they could find. And so the question is, where is his sourcing? So for this, I want to share with you the source that he has, because he just took it for granted that everybody knows this, and everybody doesn't. But he took what we're learning right now straight from the Mishnah, from the Mishnah Sanhedrin, chapter 2. On Thursday nights, we were studying Mishnahs and Mishnahs and Mishnahs, Mishnayot. In the Mishnah Sanhedrin, it talks about Umotzi le'milchemet hareshut al pi beitin shel shivim v'yachad. Sanhedrin is a Talmudic tractate that talks about the structure and authority of the courts. Structure and authority. For example, in chapter 1, it talks about how many judges comprise a court. Let's take a quick look. It tells us, skip the Hebrew because of time, in civil cases for money, I'm suing John for $20. It goes in front of a court of 3 judges, not like America where it's 1 judge. Cases concerning monetary law are adjudicated by 3 judges. How about criminal law? Accusing him of breaking into a home, 3 judges. How about tort law? Personal injury, there was a banana on aisle 8 they slipped on, adjudicated by 3 judges. How about property law? They damaged property. Cases concerning damage, if one is responsible because his property caused a damage, or adjudicated by 3 judges. So on and on and on. A whole ton of cases are decided by 3 judges. And it goes on and on. There are some cases where, according to the Torah, you got to pay double if you're found guilty. The thief pays by 3, and things like that. Still 3 judges. There's some cases if you steal someone's sheep, or if you steal someone's ox. Torah tells us if you steal the sheep, it's what is it? It's there's 5 for the sheep and 4 for the ox. The other way around, I got to refresh my memory. I've got to refresh it right on the spot. When any party steals an ox or a sheep, slaughters it, that person shall pay 5 for the ox, 4 for the sheep. There you go. 5 for the ox, 4 for the sheep. Got to stop doing that. And so that's 3 judges. Then it gets into rape, it's another story. But most things, also 3 judges, but certain things, if it's capital crime, 23 judges. So it's the nature of Sanhedrin to discuss the structure of the courts. Is it 3? Is it 23? In cases of capital punishment, it's 71. And so it goes forward through chapter 1. And then finally, Sanhedrin Gadola, Hayatashal Shivim V'yachad. And a major Sanhedrin, a life or death Sanhedrin, would be 71. And that's based on this pasuk in the Torah. What happens in the Torah in Sefer Bamidbar, Book of Numbers, chapter 11, is the people start complaining about the food. They're complaining about God's man. They've been going through the desert, and God's been raining manna, man from heaven. And some complained bitterly before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before God. And there was a whole thing, and they cried out to Moshe, etc. So first there was Tavera. And then the riffraff, the Asaf Suf in the midst, felt a gluttonous craving. And the Israelites wept, if only we had meat. It's been we don't have meat. All right, no, you could say that. You could say you're a child and you have the good luck or bad luck of having parents who are vegetarians, or Piscatorians, whatever, or Democrats or Republicans, and they won't eat meat. And imagine a kid complaining, I want real meat. Okay, it's not a sin, if you ask nicely. Parents will say, okay, it's not a sin, but you're not getting any meat, you're getting vegetables. So here they're complaining to Moshe Rabbeinu. We remember the fish that we used to eat in Egypt. We miss the fish, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks. We had flavor. Now it's man. We used to have melons and leeks and onions and garlic. Now we feel our nafshenu yevesha, our souls, not our gullets, our souls are dry, are shriveled. There's nothing but this man to look at. And then Torah tells us the man was wonderful. What are they complaining about? And Moshe heard the people weeping, and they're all complaining. And he's got no head for this. He's Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher, and really he's like goes to God, and he's basically saying to God, I don't have a head for this. You know, I'm a teacher. I'm Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm Moshe the rabbi. I'm Moshe the teacher. I'm here to teach them Torah. I'm here to teach them your word, to explain your word, answer their questions about you. I'm not here to deal with people that fetching they want onions and garlic. I'm not a caterer. What do you want? What did he? I can't take this guy. And he goes, Hashem was angry. Moshe was distressed. Be'inei Moshe. And Moshe said to Hashem, why have you dealt evil with your servant? Why did you put this on me, God? Why have I not enjoyed your favor? Why did you do this to me? Lama hare oto li'avdecha v'lo matzati chen be'einecha. Why have you been so raw, so evil to your servant? Why'd you put me in la sumit masa kolam like to put the burden of this nation on me? This nation, you have no idea what it is to have to be in charge of the Jews. They fetch, and there's so much. I don't have a head for this. Now they want garlic and they want watermelons. I mean, what did I produce all these people? Am I their father? Am I the one who gave birth to them in gender? Yelida Tihu. Did I give birth to them? Am I their genetic father? Maybe engender is a good definition. Did I engender them that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a caregiver carries an infant? Give me a break. Where am I going to get meat to give all these people? When they whine before me and they say, give us meat to eat. I can't do this. I can't. Lo uchal anochi levadi laset et kol ha'am hazeh ki chaved mimeni. I can't carry all these people myself anymore. It's too much. So God says to him, okay, so here's what we'll do. Here's the critical verse. Vayomer Hashem Moshe, God said to Moshe, Esvali shivim ish miziknei Yisrael, gather 70 elders from among the people, the elders of Israel. Asher yadata ki hem ziknei ha'am v'shot rav. 70 of the top, whom you know personally are truly great leaders, that these are experienced elders and officers. V'lakachta otam el ohel moed v'yatzvu sham imach, and bring them with you to the tent of meeting, and they will be there with you. From now on, it's not only you. I will come down when you've gathered the 70 of them in the tent of meeting, the ohel moed, which was the holy place in the desert, near the Aron Brit Hashem, near the Ark, and the Mishkan, the sanctuary. When you've got those 70 together, plus you, make 71. That's where it comes from. I will come down and speak with you there. I will draw upon the spirit that is on you and put it upon them. I will take from the abundant Holy Spirit in you uniquely, and will draw 70 parts out of those 71, and will place it on their shoulders, and they shall share the burden of the people with you, and you shall no longer bear it alone. And from that, we have the source in Mishnayos, in Sanhedrin, where they came up with Sanhedrin Gadola Hayatashal Shivim V'Yachad, that the Grand Sanhedrin The Great Sanhedrin composed of 71. Okay. So as we wind down in time now, because we're going to have to break soon, here in chapter 2, talking about the role of the Sanhedrin and everything, there's, first of all, some of the laws we just learned earlier tonight with Rambam. The king does not judge as a member of a court, and others do not place him on trial. He does not testify, and others do not testify regarding him. And we learn certain things that have to do with certain of those things, etc., etc. And then in Mishnah Dalet, in the fourth Mishnah of Perek Beis, Sanhedrin chapter 2, Motzi l'milchemet reshut al pi based in Shloshim v'yachad. We already talked about a mitzvah war, a war commanded in the Torah against the 7 nations, or Amalek, or against anyone that attacks us first, like Hamas now. All those the king can declare on his own authority. An optional war, he needs the okay of 71. Uporetz la'asot lo derech ve'ein mamachin biado. Once he gets their approval to go to war, then all heck breaks loose. He can declare eminent domain. That's why I brought out the Fifth Amendment. He can declare eminent domain in order to make a wide path so that his army can march through the ein mamachin biyado, and no one can stop him. No one can complain. Derech hamil, not like today where people bring cases in America. They litigate against the government, and they'll bring a case where you sue the United States, and you sue for any and all kinds of claims, including if the government wants to take your property and you feel for some reason they have no right, you can bring a case. Probably going to lose, but you can. Derech hamelech ein lo shiur. And there's no limit on how much eminent domain the king can declare in order, how wide to make his pathway that he wants for his army to march through with their chariots. There's no limit. Ein lo shiur. V'chol ha'am bo zin v'notnim lefanav v'notel chelek rishon. Okay. And for that, I want to finish up with this Rambam here. So you saw the source that he says, as we just learned, there's no need to seek the permission of the court to wage a milchemet mitzvah. Rather may go out on his own volition, force the nation to go out with him. By contrast, he may not lead the nation out to wage a milchemet reshut, an optional war to expand the borders for glory, unless a court of 71 judges approves. And this final Rambam I want to learn today, halakhic gimel, the king may burst, I just showed it to you in the Mishnah, so you see the source. The king may burst through the fences surrounding fields or vineyards of private property, to make a road, and no one can litigate against him. There is no limit to the width and the length of the road the king may make. Rather, it may be as wide as necessary. He need not make his road crooked because of an individual's vineyard or field. We talked about that earlier, the idea of eminent domain in America, that you don't have to normally reroute a freeway just because there's one building in the way. Under the Fifth Amendment, the government, the state, not only the federal government, the state also has the authority, can seize the building as long as they give due compensation, recompense. So the king has authority. He does not have to, in making his road for his army, that you should have to have the army on feet. They're marching on, they're not even in a car, but on foot. Ask them to march an extra half mile in order not to disrupt a gigantic vineyard or something. No, it doesn't work that way. He can take anything he wants. He can tear anything down. Rather, he can go on a straight path in order to carry out his war. And I said that's where we would stop because of the time, so that's where we'll stop because of the time. I want to thank everybody for being here. And really, I'm very grateful that you're part of this class. And I look forward to continuing learning the laws of war as we now start getting into the bloody stuff, now that we've laid the basis and the groundwork. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.